After a 4-year-long wait, we finally have the sequel to the 2016 reboot of Doom, Doom Eternal. Doom Eternal was revealed at E3 2018 with a CGI trailer, and then QuakeCon gameplay was revealed later that year. I was very much excited for Doom Eternal. Doom has always been one of my favourite video game franchises, and while I did have some minor issues with the 2016 reboot, it didn't stop it from being my favourite game of that year. Doom Eternal was originally going to release on the 22nd of November 2019, but was delayed to the 20th of March 2020, the same day that Animal Crossing New Horizons released, which has since sparked a lot of wholesome memes and interactions between both communities. Usually, two games releasing on the same day would cause rivalry between communities, but not here. Even the developers behind both games were happy with how both communities came together to celebrate the 20th of March. Anyway, Doom Eternal released to overwhelmingly positive reception from fans and critics. Many have claimed that Doom Eternal is one of the best first-person shooter games ever made. And of course, it's Doom, which means I have an obligation to talk about it. So, without further ado, it's time to rip and tear. Should also be mentioned that with my video on Doom 2016, I only talked about the single-player campaign. This time around, I will be discussing Battlemode in Doom Eternal, but the campaign has always been the make-or-break part of a Doom game, so that is what I will be tackling first. Doom Eternal's opening isn't as iconic as Doom 2016's, but it's still just as awesome. The game opens similar to the first, with a voice telling you to rip and tear until it is done, and then we hear transmissions of people on Earth being killed by the demons.
Can't hold them off! I can hear them. Hold back! No! They're everywhere!
Casualties range in the billions.
Breaking in!
We must pray now, brothers. Pray that he is watching.
We then cut to Doom Guy, aka the Doomslayer, listening in to all of this while he suits up to an awesome cover of E1M1.
For it is he that they fear, not man, or his armies. They fear the mark of the beast.
I love this opening cutscene. Just like the previous game, it gets all the necessary information across in a simple way. The premise of every Doom game is pretty simple, so there is no need for an opening cutscene with a heavy amount of exposition. Earth is getting fucked up by demons, and you're the Doomslayer. Send all the demons back to hell. It also gives us a good idea of how much time has passed between the last game and this one, as the Doomslayer now has a base of operations known as the Fortress of Doom. More on that later. He also has made some modifications to his armor, and I do like the redesign of the suit. It's a perfect blend of the 2016 Praetor suit and the classic Doom Guy suit. All the demons got heavy or slight redesigns too, and they all look great. In fact, I much prefer the visual style in Doom Eternal, or at least I prefer the color palette. Doom 2016 has a wonderful visual style to it, but most of the color palette was one note and flat in some instances. Doom Eternal's visuals pop more thanks to the variety of colors within the game. The original Doom games had a variety of color as well, so I'm happy that Eternal is making sure to follow in suit. This is also good for moment-to-moment gameplay, as it not only helps the enemies stand out against the environments more, but also helps distinguish them from other enemies. It also helps make item pickups stand out more when exploring the levels. So overall, I think Doom Eternal's visuals are a big improvement over the 2016 game. The main objective for the game is to kill the Hell Priests, who are the ones organizing the attack on Earth. The priests are consuming Earth as a resource, and the humans tried to fight off the demons, but the demons destroyed around 60% of all human life. But of course, the only thing the demons can't stop is the Slayer himself. The story is similar to that of Doom 2, where the demons started invading Earth, though this game gives an actual reason as to why they are invading. Anyway, the first level has the Slayer kill the first of their 3 Hell Priests before then confronting the other 2 as they escape. The Khan Maker then appears, telling the Slayer not to interfere.
You go too far this time. You cannot interfere. This is humanity's chance to repent, to give service to us. You cannot resist the will of the Khan Maker.
Activating the portal now.
For it was you who was meant to enforce it.
Obviously he doesn't care, and he proceeds with his plan anyway. This opening level does a great job establishing the plot and reinforcing the personality of the Slayer. It also introduces the antagonist for the game in an intimidating manner to make you understand how much authority she has, and hints towards the possible repercussions of the Slayer's actions. This is all done with very little exposition as well. The dialogue is simple and to the point, while also leaving you interested as to what will happen next. The game sets up a lot of mystery as to who the Khan Maker is, and what the end result of the Slayer saving the humans will be, and continuously answers those questions while also creating more. There is more story explored in this game, but I'll get into that later. Doom has always been mainly focused on its gameplay, so I think I should get into that. Doom's gameplay has always been simplistic in concept, but the execution of it has always been more complex than some give it credit for. Doom has a chess-like design where each weapon and enemy serve a different purpose and have clear strengths and weaknesses to encourage the player to switch up their weapons and tactics when approaching new enemies, combined with a level design that gives plenty of room for the player and enemies to move around and that encourages exploration and rewards it. Doom 2016 took the core gameplay of Doom and applied it to an arena shooter. Doom Eternal, being a continuation, does the same thing. All the weapons are back with some new ones. The pistol has been removed, with the shotgun now being the standard weapon. I think this was a good decision because while the pistol did have unlimited ammo in the 2016 game, it had no strengths over any other weapon in the game, and thus there was never a reason to switch to it unless you're out of ammo. Obviously, bloating the weapon selection is bad, so removing a useless weapon helps make each decision you make when switching weapons more meaningful because each weapon has a reason and incentive to use it. Besides, the shotgun has kind of always been the standard weapon practically any Doom player uses, so it makes sense for Doom Eternal to officially make it the standard gun. Speaking of the shotgun, it's a step up from the 2016 counterpart. Like the 2016 Doom, every weapon has 2 different weapon mods. What the reboot Doom did quite well was the balancing of the weapon mods with the gun itself. The weapon mods added new possibilities for the player, but it didn't fundamentally change the gun itself, and there was still a reason to use regular shots alongside the weapon mods. Eternal's shotgun is different in this regard, as while the weapon mods certainly make it a more useful gun, the mods overpower the regular shots from the gun, meaning that there isn't really much reason not to use the weapon mods instead of the regular shots. Weapon mods are supposed to enhance the gun, but still have weaknesses, such as cooldown times, charge-up times, or do more damage at the expense of ammo. Eternal's shotgun has this with the explosive shots, but the Gatling shotgun completely overpowers the regular shots to the point where there isn't really much reason to use the regular shots over the Gatling shots. The regular shots have delays in between where Doomguy cocks the shotgun, but the Gatling shotgun completely negates this as it allows you to continuously fire while doing the same damage. So it's easy to just keep tapping the left mouse button until the enemy is dead. You use the same amount of ammo as if you just shot them regularly, and you don't have any delays in between shots. Also, the explosive shot does way more damage with almost the exact same delay, and is also useful for taking out weak points on enemies. Basically, the shotgun is only made useful by its weapon mods and not the gun itself, which isn't a bad thing, to be clear, but it does show a difference in the way the guns have been designed for this game. The next weapon in the lineup is the Heavy Assault Cannon, which is this game's version of the Heavy Assault Rifle. It shares the same design as the shotgun, where the gun itself is only made useful by its weapon mods. It has shots which do a lot of damage to fodder enemies, but a low amount of damage to heavy enemies. It does, however, have a scope, which has a precision shot, which does more damage at the expense of a cooldown, and micro-missiles which fire, you guessed it, mini-missiles into the enemies, blowing them up. I think the Heavy Assault Cannon is well balanced. The regular shots are good for taking out fodder enemies and glory killing them for health, whereas the mods make the gun useful against higher tier demons, which I think is the same idea behind the mods for the shotgun. The scope is useful for taking out weak points, and the micro missiles are good for crowd control. Overall it works well in the combat. Next gun in the lineup is the plasma gun. My issue with the plasma gun in the reboot was that despite being powerful, the gun felt weak. That's not the case here. I think it's due to the sound effects being punchier. The gun itself does a medium to high amount of damage, depending on what you're up against. The two mods for it are a Heat Blast mod, in which continuously firing the gun builds up excess plasma, which you can disperse in front of you. You have 3 bars you can fill up. The obvious trade-off is that filling up all 3 bars makes the blast do more damage, but it takes more ammo to do so. Not to mention that when you do use the blast, you can't fire for a second or so. The other mod is this beam which stuns an enemy while you use it, and it can cook them until they explode. It's not useful during a huge combat arena with a bunch of enemies surrounding you, since you can only do it on one enemy at a time, and it slows your movement speed. And to be honest, I never really used it outside of the footage you see, mainly because the game discourages being slow, and so I decided to use the Heat Blast since it fit the bill better. There are also these shield dudes who can be exploded if enough plasma is shot at them, which can kill nearby enemies but can also damage you. There is also a new enemy, the Doom Hunter, in which using the plasma gun can take down his shields and make him easy to kill. It's a really useful gun overall. The rocket launcher is the next weapon in the lineup. It behaves almost the exact same way as the reboot rocket launcher, it just has a different aesthetic to it. The weapon mods are the same from the previous game, with both a lock-on, which is useful for taking out higher tier demons at the cost of a cooldown, and remote detonation. Remote detonation is useful if you miss an enemy because you can still do damage to them if the rocket is in their vicinity. It's a great weapon to use for clearing crowds of enemies or diminishing the health of tougher demons. The gun plays a very pivotal role. The super shotgun comes up next, and the way you obtain this thing is awesome. You play for a section where you get to control a revenant and take down other demons. That same revenant then brings it to you as you blow its head off. The gun itself doesn't have any mods, but it comes equipped with a meat hook, which allows you to grapple onto enemies and get close to them. What is cool though is that you can use this as a way to swing around the arena and jump really high into the sky, giving you more verticality. It also helps get you to enemies you can't reach from your current position, and allows you to traverse the arena much quicker and more creatively. The gun does a heavy amount of damage, but uses twice the ammo of the regular shotgun, and the reload in between shots is twice as long, so you are left open for an attack each time you use the weapon. The next weapon you acquire is the Ballista, which is the replacement for the Gauss Cannon from the reboot. The way it functions is very similar, with it being a concentrated and precise shot that does a lot of damage with a cooldown in between each shot. It's helpful for attacking stun demons or slower ones, but for enemies that move about quite a lot, it may not be the best to use. You do get a scope that sends out an explosive shot which can do damage to other enemies, and the other mod extends the width of the shot, which is great for taking out a crowd of enemies. It shares ammo with the plasma gun and can be used against the plasma shield soldiers. It's a very useful gun, especially late game against enemy weak points. Next weapon in the lineup is the chain gun. The chain gun does a heavy amount of damage while also draining ammo very fast. It shares ammo with the heavy assault cannon too, so you have to pick wisely on which gun will be more useful in certain situations. The two mods it has is a mobile turret, which adds extra barrels and increases damage with the expense of overheating quicker, and a shield which protects all attacks from the front. Both are very good as they serve different purposes, one defense, one offense. It's a useful gun for taking out both small crowds and heavy demons, so it serves its role very well. Next gun introduced is the BFG 9000, which acts the same as it did in the reboot. It's a powerhouse, allowing you to kill practically anything in one shot, but the gun has only 2 shots available this time instead of 3, and the ammo is very scarce. So if you want to be effective with the gun, then you have to pick the right spots to use it. It is really satisfying when you pull off some awesome kills with it though. Final weapon introduced is a one-hit kill melee weapon, the Crucible. You won't get to use it as much, but whenever you do, you feel badass as hell. It's mostly useful for taking out tanky demons with a lot of health. I think the ammo system could have been done better though, because you gain ammo by picking up these charge things, and you only get 3 at a time, and they are very scarce. In fact, the ammo for this thing is more scarce than the BFG ammo. I think it could have been done as a sort of perk or kill streak, where you kill a certain number of demons, and then you are gifted the power-up where you get to go crazy with it. The Soul Cube in Doom 3 worked in a similar way, so I think it could have worked here. Then again, Berserk is also in the game, and that serves the same purpose. The Crucible is just here for story reasons, but in terms of gameplay, it feels kind of thrown in. There is also the Unmaker from Doom 64, which makes a return. You have to clear all the Slayer gates to get it, and it's a letdown. There's no real reason to use it in combat. It uses the same ammo as the BFG, and the BFG is way more effective at killing demons. I mean, if you have the infinite ammo cheat on, then you can get some fun out of it, but if you're playing the game for real, there's no motivation to use it. There's nothing that the Unmaker can do that the BFG 9000 can't do better. Equipment also plays a key role in the combat. Grenades are back with this mounted shoulder cannon. This makes it so that you never have to stop firing to throw grenades, thus speeding up the pace of the game. You have 2 types of grenades, regular explosives and ice bombs. Both have good uses. The former is good for clearing crowds of fodder demons and dealing damage to higher tier demons, and the ice bomb is useful for when you feel that there are so many demons on screen that you can't keep up with. While the effects of the ice bomb don't last very long on the higher tier demons, it does allow you to safely focus your attention on other demons or get out of harm's way if you're about to be killed. It also works as a damage boost and is useful on demons like the Mancubus, which have a close range attack that deals huge damage. I think the grenade system overall works great as they can be used for multiple situations. However, they're well balanced as there is a cooldown in between each use, so you can't consistently use them to win each combat encounter. You have to save them for the best opportunities. There is also the Flame Belch, which is a flamethrower that sets demons on fire and causes any damage done to them to drop armor. This attack works as both an offensive and defensive option. Offensive because it works as a damage boost, and defensive because it allows you to gain armor more efficiently and thus take more punishment. Glory Killing Demons fills up the Blood Punch bar. Blood punches are super powerful punches that do an insane amount of damage. It's useful for taking out weak points on enemies as the blast from the punch annihilates them. I do think the movement speed in the game is still a bit too slow, but the game gives you a dash function which can be upgraded to 2 dashes, and you can also upgrade the recharge time to be almost instantaneous. So this mechanic pretty much negates that issue. That was a lot to get through, but Doom Eternal is once again very solid in terms of weapon variety and balance. All the weapons in the game have clear strengths and weaknesses, and each serve a clear purpose in the gameplay. There really is no best weapon in the game. It's down to you to use these weapons as effectively as possible. The ammo capacity for every weapon has also been lowered considerably, meaning that the game will be forcing you to switch weapons constantly. I think this was a good change because it adds a weakness to every gun of limited ammo, and so it makes the player want to use the weapons more effectively instead of just spamming the same weapon constantly. You can upgrade the ammo capacity, but even then, guns still don't have enough ammo to just spam them continuously. So the game not only motivates the player to constantly change weapons in order to adapt to the situation, but also heavily reinforces this style of play with the ammo limit. And it does this without being annoying. Despite the limited ammo, you can get a good amount of use out of every weapon before it runs out of ammo, if you know what you're doing. You get ammo back by using the chainsaw, which also provides a small amount of health back. You have 1 bar which constantly refills and can be used on fodder demons. You'll need 3 bars to use it on higher tier demons. The first bar refills pretty fast, and the arenas have fodder demons respawn constantly, so there is always a way to obtain more ammo. However, it doesn't always refill your ammo to the max, and so sometimes you just have to make the best out of what you've got. It's a great way to limit the ammo count without breaking the pace of the game, and encourages the player to plan out which weapon they're going to use next and why, and also plan ahead on which enemy they're going to attack next. Not to mention that weapon switching is an incredibly useful tactic where you shoot a gun, usually a one-shot gun that is powerful, and then immediately quick switch to another gun and then switch back, which is faster than just waiting for the gun to reload, recharge, or cool down. Wait a minute, weapon switch combos? What is this, Devil May Cry? Yes. Yes, it is. You can mix and match guns for some really awesome combos, such as the ballista and super shotgun. Instead of waiting for the ballista to cool down after a shot, you can quickly switch to the super shotty and get a quick shot out of it, and then switch back to the ballista, which is not only faster than waiting for the ballista to cool down, but also does more damage to the enemy. Since both the super shotty and the ballista have delays in between shots, it means doing this basically cancels out these delays and allows the player to emit constant damage upon the enemy. Of course, this isn't the only weapon combo that works. Basically, the tactic is to combine powerful weapon cooldowns with other powerful weapon cooldowns, and then use weapon switch to cancel out the delays. Heck, it doesn't even have to be just two weapons. While two weapon combos are the easiest to pull off, thanks to the quick switch button which switches you to the last used gun, if you're good enough at switching between all the guns in the game on the fly, then you can potentially combine a bunch of different guns in the game into several massive combos for enemies. When you pull it off, it not only looks cool, but it causes a huge amount of damage to the enemies you face. But even this strategy has a weakness to it, as you'll be using more ammo from all the guns more frequently, and thus it's easier to run out. Even the most powerful strategies in this game have downsides you need to be aware of when using them. So overall, the weapon design has great variety, with each gun being unique and useful. It encourages the player to switch weapons constantly to keep combat fresh, and encourages different strategies for using the guns, while also making sure any single way you can play the game has a weakness to it, and so you have to constantly be adapting to the game. But another element of Doom's chess-like gameplay is the enemies, which are supposed to function in a way similar to your guns, where they all have clear and distinct purposes in the gameplay and have clear strengths and weaknesses. So, how do the demons fare in this game? The enemies are split into two main categories, fodder and heavy. Fodder enemies are, as you guessed, cannon fodder, which are meant to be used for farming resources. These include enemies such as the Unwilling, which are the weakest enemy in the game. You can kill them in literally 2 shots. They roam around the arena and try to attack you, but their attacks do very little damage. You can glory kill them to bring back any health you lose, or chainsaw them to gain ammo. They don't really serve any purpose in the combat beyond that. Another fodder type is the soldiers, of which there are 2 types, Blaster and Shield. Blaster is basically a remake of the original Doom zombie marines. They fire plasma projectiles at you and can charge it up too. They function almost the exact same as the UAC soldier in the previous game. It's mainly just their character model that has been changed. They work well, as while the projectiles don't do much damage, it does motivate the player to stay on the move. They also work well with really any combination of enemies. They aren't tough on their own, but when a heavy demon shows up alongside them, they can kick your ass if you don't pay enough attention. I think they work better than the original games because their attacks are all projectile based and thus can be avoided. The shield type is basically the shield soldier from the previous game, except the attacks are now projectile based instead of hit scan, which is much more fair. You can also overcharge the shield with either the plasma gun or ballista, which will cause them to explode. You can use this to your advantage, as you can use this as a way to take care of other demons surrounding them. I think both soldiers add variety to the game, as one acts offensive and one acts defensive. They encourage you to be more mobile and also encourage you to switch weapons, so they work well. The Imp is also another fodder demon. It functions the exact same way as it did in Doom 2016. Its design hasn't changed much either. They are fast and agile, but they are also very weak. They throw fireballs to flush you out of certain areas, but these can be easily avoided. I think the Imp works fine. He achieves what he sets out to do, convince the player to move around more. The Lost Souls are back, and they are not as annoying as the other Doom games, but still pretty annoying. I'd say the annoyance meter peaked with Doom 64. They just ram into you, and you just use a shotgun to shoot them away. It's pretty boring enemy design if I'm honest, and they aren't that hard to deal with. You just have to be facing the right direction when they ram you. They've always been a boring enemy in the Doom games, and this one is no different. If they were removed, I'm sure no one would care. A new enemy type is the Gargoyle, which can fly around and spit acid at you, but it doesn't really add anything unique to the game, and functions very similar to the Imp, and we already have the Imp in the game, so I don't see the point. It's not a bad enemy, its inclusion is just pointless. There are the Maker Drones, which you fight towards the end of the game. The most effective way to kill them is with headshots, as it drops all the resources a chainsaw kill would. The fodder demons serve their purpose well. They aren't meant to be super challenging enemies, they're meant to work as a way for the player to gain more resources while still engaging in combat. These enemies are tough when combined with heavy demons, but on their own, they don't hold their own weight. So I think they work well. But the meat of the combat comes from the heavy demons. How do they fare? The Hell Knights return and they function the same way as they did in the previous game. They are fast and agile and do quite a bit of damage, but their attacks are all highly telegraphed, so if you take a hit, then it's your fault. It encourages mobility and has opportunities to stagger, so really any way of taking him out is a viable option. Cacodemons are back, and they are largely unchanged. They fly around, breaking up the tradition of enemies always being grounded. They can lunge in for a bite, and their projectiles do a lot of damage, but them being up in the air doesn't leave them much cover, and so they are always open for an attack. You can also use grenades to stagger them, and the animation's funny. You can also use the meat hook on them as a way to launch you up into the air and give you more opportunity for air attacks. Pinkies are the exact same as Doom 2016. They are armoured from the front, they charge you, and have a weak point at the back. One change I do appreciate is that in Doom 2016, Pinkies would suffer pretty much no damage from the front because of their armour. This has been changed in Doom Eternal so that attacking them from the front does considerably less damage than attacking them from the back. It just speeds up fights with them, and it means you don't always have to use the same dodge tactic to beat them. Explosives also work on them quite well. There is also the Spectre, which is a partially invisible version of the Pinky but has 0 armor. The Baron of Hell is back, and I find him to be a disappointing inclusion. The Baron has always been my favorite demon in Doom, and the 2016 game made him a force to be reckoned with. Every time this dude showed up, you shat yourself. In this game though, he doesn't really feel all that much different to fighting a Hell Knight, and taking him down is super easy. I can't exactly explain what I don't like about him, but he just doesn't pack as much punch as before. Now, before we get into the next couple enemies, Doom Eternal has added this new mechanic where enemies have weak points, and shooting them off not only does more damage, but it also makes them easier to deal with and can change the fight with them in some ways. The Mancubus is pretty much the same from the last game, but his design has changed to look more like the Doom 2 sprite. It fires powerful projectiles at you and has an attack if you get too close. You can shoot off its cannons, which will make it only able to fire out small projectiles, thus making it easier to fight. The Cyber Mancubus is also in the game, although not as much. Instead of fire, it shoots out acid, which can stain the floor, thus encouraging the player to be mobile when attacking. The Revenant functions the same as the previous game, firing out rockets if you get too far, and being able to achieve a missile barrage. You can shoot the cannons off its shoulder, however, leaving it only able to do melee attacks. It's a fun enemy because it's an almost perfect balance of mobility and strength. The Arachnotron from Doom 2 also makes a return, making it the first 3D appearance of the demon. Doom 3 was going to feature the Arachnotron, but it was cut. The Arachnotron has 2 ranged attacks, being a cannon on its head, and missiles which it can send out. It can also melee you if you get too close. You can shoot off the cannon, which then turns it into a more defensive enemy, since it can only fire out missiles. I love its design and inclusion in the game, and how just one enemy can provide variety by its 2 modes of play. These are the only 3 enemies to have this feature, but having a normal and battle damage state for these enemies can switch up the combat itself and how you approach it. However, there are times where taking out weak points isn't always a viable option because you need a precise shot to do so, and you aren't always in a situation where you can do that. It's a risk versus reward mechanic, and it works great as it adds more variety to how you fight demons. Not to mention that even if an enemy doesn't have weak points, you can still blow off parts of its body when shooting it. This doesn't really have a mechanical purpose from what I know, but it does look cool as hell, and it also works as a visual indicator for how close to death they are. Speaking of returning Doom 2 enemies, the Archvile is back, and I love its pose and how it recreates the original sprite. The Archvile doesn't move around much, but it is a powerhouse. Its attacks have huge range, it can set the floor on fire, and takes a lot of damage to kill. However, because of how slow it is, it's a sitting duck. It's well balanced overall. The Pain Elemental also makes a return, but it is very underwhelming because of how slow it is, and it's very easy to kill, even in a group of enemies. I mean, it's less annoying than in Doom 2, but I still don't like how unchallenging it is to fight. He does throw out some lost souls, but they're easy to deal with, and his attacks aren't as effective as the Kako Demon. Another disappointing inclusion is the Tyrant, which is this game's version of the Cyber Demon. It's not hard to deal with. The only attack you have to be concerned about is this laser-guided attack, but even that is easy to avoid. Even in a group of demons, it's easy to focus on and kill. Besides, the Archvile already serves the same purpose of being a stationary yet powerful demon. There is also the Prowler, which functions almost the exact same as the Imp, with just a teleport. I don't see the point of this demon. It's not badly designed or anything, but when you already have a demon that facilitates the same purpose, adding another one just bloats the demon roster. I guess I should use this as an opportunity to talk about the new demons. The Carcass is a support demon that can put up a shield inside the arenas. This is done as a way to stop the player from abusing the rocket launcher, as the Carcass can put up a shield right in your face as you fire a rocket launcher, thus making it blow up in your face. The demon itself isn't hard to take down, but when you combine it with a room full of demons, the shields make the other demons hard to deal with. I think it's a very good inclusion overall. It prevents RPG spam and makes the fight more difficult without being unfair or tedious. Whiplash is a new inclusion and is kind of a mixed bag. I think its attacks, despite being well telegraphed, are a bit too fast and it is annoying to deal with in tighter sections. I mean, this could just be me being bad at the game, but I do think the attack speed needed tweaking. Other than that, it's a pretty fun enemy to fight. The Dread Knight is a mix between the Hell Knight and the Baron of Hell, and thus isn't a very unique enemy. Don't get me wrong, it's well designed and fun to fight with well telegraphed animations, but I don't see the point in this enemy being in the game if it's just going to be a combination of two already existing enemies. It bloats the enemy roster. That's an issue I have with some of the demons in this game. They're not bad, but there are already other demons which serve the same purpose. Each enemy should have a unique role in the gameplay, and these don't. Probably my favourite new enemy is the Doom Hunter. It's a mini-boss with a wide range of attacks. It has missiles for long-range attacks, and has a double-bladed flame chainsaw for close-range attacks. Taking these guys out is a two-stage fight. First, you have to disable his sled, and then you finish him off with whatever gun you want. He can move around the map efficiently, he encourages the player to use different weapons to take him down, and he is tough to take down without feeling bullet spongy. He's a welcome addition overall. But now, we get to the most divisive enemy in the game, the Marauder.
Warning. Demonic presence threat level 5 entering main laboratory.
Opening the portal now.
Nothing but a usurper, a false idol. My eyes have been opened. Let me help you to see, Slayer.
The Marauder has received a lot of criticism for breaking the pace of the game and the flow of combat, or just being poorly designed overall. I've seen plenty of gameplay clips of people fighting this enemy, and they just clearly have no idea how to fight him. When you first encounter him, the game says that if you get too close, he uses his shotgun, if you go too far, he uses projectiles, and if you stay mid-range, then he goes in for a melee, which you can counter, to deal damage. He also has a shield that blocks attacks from the front. He's not hard to beat, to be honest. If you use weapon switch combos correctly, then you only have to counter him like 2 or 3 times before you can go in for a glory kill. Luckily, if you run far enough away from him, he will chase after you, and when he gets close, he will automatically do a melee attack, which you can counter. He also has a wolf that spawns if you shoot his shield too much, thus punishing you for wasting ammo. I disagree that he breaks the pace of the game or the flow of combat, as he forces you to stay on the move, which will often lead to him chasing you down and thus leading to a counterable attack. You can slow down and keep your distance to fight him, but you aren't forced to. During an arena, you can still stay on the move and fight other demons until he comes in for an attack. My issue with him is that the tutorial doesn't make this very clear. It says that if you go too far, then he will use projectiles, but it never says that he will chase after you, leading to the impression that you have to stay mid-range to fight him when you don't. I think they could have made this more clear in the tutorials. which by the way, the tutorials in this game are kind of annoying, but you can turn them off. The Marauder is an overall fun enemy to fight, and there isn't really anything wrong with him design-wise, but the tutorial gives a false idea of how to fight him, which is likely why so many people have issues fighting him. So there are a lot of new and old enemies in this game, and they're all fun to fight. My issue, as said previously, is that some demons function very similarly to other ones, and thus don't add anything new gameplay-wise. I appreciate the effort the artists and animators went through to create them, but they don't need to be in the game because they only bloat the selection. Doom has a chess-like design, and in chess each piece serves a completely unique purpose. Having demons that are basically alternative versions of already existing ones takes away from that chess element. However, that doesn't make them any less fun to fight, and most of the enemies in the game do serve a unique role in the combat, which will make you switch up weapons and strategies in order to fight them. All of their attacks are either telegraphed or projectile based as well, which means they are all dodgeable and the damage they do is fair. So the enemies are well balanced overall. But good weapon and enemy design only takes the combat so far. The final piece that needs to fall into place is the level design. Doom Eternal is solid in this department as well. Almost every arena in this game is great, which is even more impressive considering that the game is 14 hours long, and yet the quality of the level design doesn't decrease over those 14 hours. Doom Eternal's arenas have the 3 essential elements that any FPS arena needs. The arenas have very clustered cover, where each object and piece of geometry is not spread out evenly, and thus they each have their own uses, especially when you take into account the verticality in this game. The arenas have circular navigability, which allows for both you and the demons to move around the level freely, which leads to more interesting encounters, and there are plenty of ways for both parties to flank each other, and areas that motivate doing so. And finally, the arenas also have good observability. Oftentimes, before you enter the arena, you get a good look at the battleground before you enter into combat, and get to note some key features of it, which is helpful for when you die and need to rethink your strategy, which will be a lot, because this game is very challenging. So the arenas themselves are all solid, and they all allow you to take advantage of everything in your arsenal, and considering that a lot of the arenas have different levels to fight on, it makes encounters more interesting as you can ascend or descend quickly to get to other demons, and use the height as an advantage, though the demons can do the same. It should also be mentioned that I love the variety of locations you visit in this game. Each mission has a unique look and feel to it, and it just makes the game more fun to play. One issue I had with Doom 2016 was that almost every level looked the same. Luckily this has been fixed in Eternal. So in terms of combat, Doom Eternal is rock solid. Weapons have a unique purpose that can be combined for devastating blows. The enemy selection, while a little bit inflated, is fun to fight and will force you to switch up your strategy, and the arena design allows for this combat to flow with plenty of ways to traverse the arena and taking advantage of the game's verticality, while also giving you enough sight lines to plan out your next move. So yeah, Eternal's combat is rock fucking solid. But, while that is the biggest chunk of gameplay, there are other elements I want to discuss. I'll talk about power-ups quickly. I'm very disappointed with them. Not because they aren't cool, they are, but because of how scarce they are. You'll only come across maybe one of each type in the entire game, and they're only used for 1 or 2 combat arenas, which makes me question what was the point of having them in the game. There are cheat codes which allow you to use these power-ups as much as you want, but I would have liked to have seen them more in the levels because otherwise, they just seem like an arbitrary inclusion. Cheat codes are really fun though. My favourite is the QuakeCon cheat, which has a crowd cheer you on while you play. There are plenty of collectibles to find, and some of them are easy to get, but some of them are a bit more challenging to obtain. The levels are pretty open-ended, and at the end of each level you get the option to fast travel back to earlier parts to obtain them. You can also return to a mission after the fact if you missed anything. These collectibles include figurines, which allow you to view character models in all their glory, vinyls, which allow you to listen to music from Wolfenstein 3D, Quake, and the original Doom games, as well as Doom 3 and Doom 2016, while exploring the Fortress of Doom. The Fortress of Doom acts as a hub world between some levels where the Doomslayer chills. I have to say that the collectibles in this game are way more fun to collect because you can see the progress you're making when collecting them. You can also collect Sentinel cores throughout the levels, which will allow you to open up more parts of the ship and collect new items, such as new weapon mods, Predator suit tokens, more on that in a bit, or upgrade your health, armor, or ammo. My personal favourite is the alternate skins for the Slayer that he wears during cutscenes and gameplay. You can unlock the 2016 Predator suit, a suit based upon the Night Sentinels, and the godfather of them all, the classic Doom Guy skin. These are all fun to collect, but there is a minor issue with this, and that is that the number of upgrades you can use isn't calibrated to the amount you can obtain. In my playthrough, I have fully upgraded the Slayer, but I still have Predator suit tokens left over that I can't use. Same with Sentinel cores. It's a minor issue, but it means that you will have extra tokens left over that you can't use. Speaking of the tokens, they're pretty useless. The differences they make during gameplay is minor, and they could have been removed and nothing would have changed. Less is more sometimes, and Doom's gameplay is already deep and complex with all the weapons and their mods, as well as all the enemies you face. Upgrades aren't needed. I get that having upgrades gives a sense of progression, but you already get that from obtaining new weapons in the game, and also facing new enemies. And obtaining or facing new stuff is way more satisfying than upgrading already existing stuff. The upgrade system doesn't damage the game, but it is unnecessary. It's not needed in a Doom game. However, one of my favourite things in the game is all the Easter eggs. There is one room in the Fortress of Doom, which is the Slayer's own personal crib, and this is a Doom nerd's wet dream. You have a painting of the Slayer with his bunny Daisy, created by Zals on Twitter, as well as the cage for his bunny. You can find magazines about demon slaying, books detailing how to rip and tear, as well as some literature. Doom Guy has the original Doom games and Quake games on his shelf, which is weird because it means those games canonically exist within the universe. He also has a Commander Keen helmet at the top of his bookshelf and one of the collectibles from the previous game. There are also some books which make references to other games, such as Prey, Fallout, some references to the original Doom, Wolfenstein, Deus Ex, Half-Life, Duke Nukem, and some others I don't get the reference to. There is also a reference to Markiplier's father here too.
How to comb your mustache, Clifton M. Fishbach. That's my dad's name. And my dad had a killer mustache. Here's a picture of my dad with a mustache. They put this in because I said to them how important this game was to me. This was one of the original games that I ever played, and it always has a special place in my heart. And so they said they were going to do something special, and now it's going to be in the game forever. And it's the biggest book here too. That's really nice. That's really nice. That is really sweet. And, you know, it's such a small, it may seem like such a small thing, but my dad's name is like in this game forever now. And anyone can see it, and anyone can find it, and anyone can learn how to comb your mustache.
Damn, its software really cool. You can also find some vinyls of the 2016 soundtrack, some dope-ass guitars, a 3-monitor setup where the Doom Guy listens to remixes of the soundtrack, and has pictures of his bunny, as well as a best kills compilation. He has a pizza box on his desk, he has the 2016 armor being modified, and my favourite, he has an old 90s computer which can play through the entire campaigns of Doom 1 and Doom 2, which means that you get 3 games in one when you buy this game. I love this characterization because it shows that when Doom Guy is killing demons, he's the most pissed off dude in the universe, but when he's not killing demons, he's just a chill dude who reads literature, plays video games, eats pizza, and is an animal lover. There is also a training section at the bottom of the ship where you can test your skills. So in terms of Easter eggs and collectibles, Doom has plenty of it. I'm sure I've missed some while recording this very video. What I also love is that the game isn't in your face about this. There's one room dedicated to all these Easter eggs, and you can avoid it if you want. So, Doom Eternal not only has solid combat with great weapon design, enemy design, and arena design, but also has plenty of collectibles to keep you exploring the levels. In terms of criticisms, I hate the purple goo that slows you down. It's annoying when they throw it into combat arenas. It doesn't slow down the demons, so it's no fun. Doom is about being as fast as possible, and this is anything but that. Another thing which I don't really think is a problem, more something that is underdeveloped, is the boss fights. There are only 3 real boss fights in the game, and they aren't as memorable as Doom 2016's boss fights, mainly because instead of a 1v1 battle, you have to fight other demons while you fight the boss. I guess this is more of a subjective thing, but I prefer fighting a boss one-on-one instead of having to fight both the boss and his minions. I know they are there to replenish health and armor and ammo, but the Icon of Sin has Crucible pickups respawn, so why not just have resources respawn throughout the fight? I mean, that's how the bosses worked in the previous game. If you staggered them, they would give out ammo and health. To be clear, the boss fights aren't bad, they just aren't my type. One thing I do hate is how the game doesn't start you with 100% resources when you select a mission. Some of your guns will still be out of ammo when you start, and since stronger guns such as the Crucible, BFG 9000 and Unmaker don't appear in the earlier levels, there aren't any ammo pickups for it, so you can't really use them. Another feature I do think is stupid is the extra lives. I think the maximum number you can obtain is 99. I'm not sure, but I did have like 30 extra lives at one point, and I think allowing the player to have that many retries is too much. I think it should be limited to a lower number such as 3. Actually, I think they should limit the amount you can carry down to 1, that way you can get a second chance if you fuck up, but another mistake is death. Giving the player like 30 plus retries, like, that's just insane. That's not good design. It doesn't encourage me to get better at the game, it just encourages me to stockpile as many extra lives as possible if I'm having trouble. This was a huge issue on my Nightmare playthrough of the game because I had so many extra lives that I never actually died on my playthrough because they always brought me back. I do think the platforming is also pretty basic. It works as a way to break up combat, but all the platforming boils down to is just sticking to a wall, scanning the area to see where you need to jump to next, and then jumping there. It's really not that deep, which isn't a bad thing, but I think more interesting things could have been done with the platforming in this game. One really annoying thing that happened to me was when I was playing in the combat section of the Fortress of Doom. I was testing out different key bindings to see which was the most comfortable. After I beat the wave, I wanted to go back down, but the elevator wouldn't let me, so I just thought, okay, I'll just restart the level. I hit reset mission, and I was hit with a bunch of prompts about weapon upgrades, which I thought was strange because I had upgraded all my weapons. Then I checked and found out that by hitting reset button, the game reset all my progress back to when I first beat the game. So I lost all my collectibles and upgrades in that time. I think the game is coded so that progression is tied to the last mission you beat for the first time, and the last mission I beat for the first time was the final mission, so it reset all my data back to when I beat the game. It was really annoying, and I had to spend an entire afternoon getting all the collectibles back. I hope this issue is fixed in a patch because it is super annoying. But other than that, I don't really have any major complaints with the game. Most of my complaints boil down to stuff that is either redundant, such as certain enemy types, or underdeveloped stuff like the platforming. Most of the proper issues I do have, like the purple goo, don't appear that much in the game anyway, and don't really detract from my perspective on the game. However, I have heard many criticisms about Doom Eternal that I consider to be invalid, so let's take a look at them. First complaint is that ammo is too low.
But even then, you'll find yourself reloading a lot of arenas because there are just too many enemies to deal with unless you do it in a specific way, because ammo is very limited and the BFG doesn't seem to effectively kill everything anymore, and it feels like its effective range has been reduced too. Now, about that ammo pool. Even at max upgrades, you'll find that you have the same amount of weapons and the same amount of ammo types, but now you have, at times, less than half the ammunition available to you in Doom 2016. As an example, the maximum amount of ammo you can get for the shotgun is 24 shells in Doom Eternal, whereas it was 60 in Doom 2016. Supposedly, this is geared to make you use all the tools in your arsenal, but for one, some weapons are much better at dealing with certain enemies than others, and of course, the good stuff is going to run out because they keep on spawning the harder stuff, and for another, if you have to use every item in your rotation in order to get through the mid to late game encounters, is that really having many tools in your arsenal, or is that having just one tool in your arsenal because you can't do it any other way? Yes, you will have at least one tick in your chainsaw gauge at all times because it regenerates now, but half the enemies you fight are either chainsaw proof because I summon chainsaw deflectors, and in order to kill anything bigger than an imp, you need a full fuel gauge, which is hard to come by for most of the game.
Because your ammo recharge is tied directly to chainsaw kills, and for some reason ammo pickups on the ground, especially in heavy combat rooms, are less than plentiful, you will need to be conserving chainsaw fuel for the right moments. However, because of how annoyingly long some of these fights are, especially when you get to the point where marauders show up, but that's a whole separate topic I'll get to in a minute, you are going through ammo faster than you can get it back. On top of this, your ammo reserves and carry capacity without speccing heavily into certain upgrades are extremely low. And finally, when you use your chainsaw ability on a larger enemy, it consumes multiple fuel points. The end result, all of this combined, is that you very often need to get chainsaw kills to have any ammunition at all for any gun. And if you are stuck with 2 or 3 large enemies to kill without enough fuel in the vicinity, it utterly and completely destroys the pacing of the game, as you dodge around trying to either grenade them to death over the span of several minutes or somehow find scraps of resources with which to fight.
This complaint often comes from reviewers who almost never use the chainsaw in their footage. As said previously, the first bar of chainsaw always refills, and by the time you start getting low on ammo, it will have already refilled. And since fodder demons respawn during the later levels in the game, there will always be a way to obtain more ammo. Not to mention that you shouldn't be waiting until you've depleted all of your ammo before you chainsaw, because that's dumb. The smart way to play is to use a mixture of your weapons, and after about 2 or 3 of them shout low ammo at the bottom of the screen, go get more ammo. If you mix your weapons smartly, then you'll never run out. Heck, if you want to, you could just use the chainsaw refill as an indicator to get more ammo. Do whatever you want, but if you're waiting until you have used every last bullet before thinking, maybe I should get more ammo, that's a stupid way to play the game. Plan ahead. The next complaint is that enemies are too bullet spongy.
I'd be missed if I didn't mention that even on the default Hurt Me Plenty difficulty, all the demons in hell must live in pineapples under the sea because them suckers spongy. The issues about ammo or enemy overabundance wouldn't be so bad if things went down in a reasonable number of chain gun rounds to the face.
Once again, most reviewers who make this claim almost never use any equipment in their footage. Flame Belch not only gives you armor, but it also works as a damage boost. Use it if you feel like an enemy is taking too much ammo to kill. Not to mention that grenades and freeze bombs exist, which deal damage and stop the enemy dead in their tracks and leave them open to an attack, while also acting as a damage boost. Not to mention that weapon switching also increases your damage output. Point being that there are multiple ways to increase the damage output you do to enemies, yet most reviewers I have watched show the reviewer barely using any of these items. If you're not using your arsenal to its full extent and then dying, that's your fault. The next complaint is that most of the arenas have you run around in circles.
This all eventually leads to a very repetitive core game where you will almost always shoot the bad things until you run out of ammo, but now more bad things have spawned, leaving you with low health, no bullets, and more demons than when you started with in the first place. Then you run away looking for a conveniently placed zombie to chainsaw and die a few times in the process until you figure out how this particular arena loops around, and you can do a little circuit around the arena waiting for your chainsaw meter to refill, chainsawing an imp, shooting a bit more, running out of ammo, running around in circles again to chainsaw another imp that will perpetually spawn.
Yes, it's an arena shooter. That's exactly what you do in an arena shooter. Have any of you played Quake 3? The next complaint is that melee does no damage.
I find it ironic that while in the last game, if you were low on health or munitions, you charged straight into the hordes of demons to refill your stuff. Now you have to run away because your melee no longer deals damage unless you have a specific power-up charge and will only stagger enemies at best.
This was done because in Doom 2016, you could cheap your way out by insta-glory killing smaller demons to get more health. In Eternal, you have to use ammo to glory kill smaller demons. It's a trade-off as you have to use some of your most precious resource to get health back, or chainsaw them to get ammo. It's done so that you can't just have a get-out-of-jail free card with fodder demons. The next complaint is that the Marauder is bullshit. Oh wait, I already explained this. The next complaint is that the game forces you to play a certain way, and if you don't play by the game's rules, then it kills you.
But even then, you'll find yourself reloading a lot of arenas because there are just too many enemies to deal with unless you do it in a specific way. And for another, If you have to use every item in your rotation in order to get through the mid to late game encounters, is that really having many tools in your arsenal? Or is that having just one tool in your arsenal because you can't do it any other way?
This can be applied to literally every video game ever made. Of course, this can be a valid criticism for some games where the games don't allow for a lot of creative freedom, Rockstar games, but this doesn't really apply to Eternal. Yes, the game has a set of rules and wants you to play a certain way. It wants you to constantly switch up weapons, it wants you to constantly be on the move, it wants you to constantly chainsaw enemies to regain ammo and health, but these rules allow for a lot of freedom on how you fight the enemies. Yes, you do have to play within the rules of the game, but these rules allow for a lot of creative freedom. Everyone who plays this game is going to have a different playstyle, and the game encourages you to experiment with what weapon works best against certain enemies and how you can adapt it into your way of playing the game. Every game needs to have rules. If a game doesn't have rules, then it's boring. Even now, I'm still figuring out new ways to deal with encounters within the game and new weapon combos on enemies. So yes, you do have a lot of freedom when it comes to fighting enemies. I also think this criticism is made from people who just constantly want to use their favourite weapon, but they can't because of the ammo limit. They don't want the challenge of having to manage your resources and push your weapons to their max use. They just want to be able to hold down left mouse and win the game. Doom isn't that type of game. In general, it appears most of the criticisms for the game come from people who can't be bothered to learn the game's mechanics and instead just want the game to be like Doom 2016. While I love 2016, there are some times where the game can give you too much ammo and doesn't encourage you to switch up weapons a lot. Weapons like the super shotgun or rocket launcher could clear an entire room of demons pretty easily, and so there wasn't really much reason to change. Weapon switching is the most fun way to play Doom 2016, but it's not the most effective. So by putting limitations on how much you can use your guns, and by making certain guns more effective in certain situations than others, you are forced to play the game in the most fun way possible. To be clear, if you dislike this game, that's fine. No game is made for everyone, and it's impossible that 100% of the audience that plays the game will enjoy it. However, falsely criticizing the game for having these flaws, when these flaws stem from your inability to play the game how it's intended, is not good criticism. If this game isn't your cup of tea, then that's fine, but there's a difference between a game not being your cup of tea and a game being bad. This isn't a flawless game by any means, but I'm tired of seeing all these criticisms constantly raised against the game, considering none of them have any legs to stand on. I'm tired of basically any video game that has mechanics with more depth than a sheet of paper being criticized for being too complex, all because the people playing the game don't actually want to put in the time and effort into learning the mechanics and figuring out their own unique playstyle that fits within the gameplay. Anyway, yeah, a lot of the criticisms raised against this game simply aren't true. Doom Eternal's gameplay is one hell of a fun time, and when it all comes together, you get one of the best single-player first-person shooter games ever made. The fast-paced action, the strategical combat, the planning ahead with resource management, the awesome weapon combos, the verticality. Many games have these elements, but none of them have pulled it off so well like Doom Eternal. Most of my criticisms with the game aren't things that are bad, but are mostly just things that are redundant and don't need to be in the game. I honestly don't really have anything major negative to say about this game. It's a massive step up for the genre. Will it have the same impact as the original Doom and Doom 2? Probably not. But the FPS genre will never be the same after this game. Any action FPS will be compared to Doom Eternal afterwards in the way it executes its mechanics, which makes me both excited and concerned. Excited because it means future FPS games will need to step up their game when it comes to combat and arena design, but it also makes me concerned about the possibility that no game, or at least barely any games, will come close to achieving what Eternal does with its gameplay. Doom Eternal is to the FPS genre what Devil May Cry 4 was to the hack and slash genre, where it had the most deep and complex mechanics in its genre that no game since has matched. If it's going to be the same for Doom Eternal, then holy shit, this is peak FPS design. But Doom Eternal also has a story. While Doom is, and always will be, a gameplay-first series, I think it would be interesting to take a look at the narrative. Right, so before anyone makes the obvious joke of why are you covering the story in a Doom game, and then post that one out-of-context John Carmack quote, while the Doom franchise has always put its emphasis on gameplay, ever since Doom 3 the series has also started focusing on the story. The original games just had a couple pages of text to explain the basic plot, and that was it. That changed with Doom 3, of course, which had full-on cutscenes and text logs, and with the 2016 reboot, even more story was added. id Software themselves have said they want to build a Doom universe, starting with this game. Not to mention that the plot in these games has become more important for fleshing out the context behind the levels, and the fact that the narrative in the reboot was extremely well handled. A lot of thought was put into everything in the Doom universe. Every character, location, item, weapon, demon, whatever, has a backstory surrounding it. It's up to you if you want to explore it or not. So yes, while Doom is a gameplay first series, that doesn't mean that no thought was put into the plot or that the plot is bad. So how does Doom Eternal fare with the story? Doom Eternal has decided to go with third-person cutscenes for its storytelling. Some people dislike this, despite this not being a new addition to the series. I think it works well, as it allows the game to build more of the Slayer's character by showing his full body movement. The Slayer's character is entirely based around body language, so wanting to show more of that isn't a bad thing. And you might say that all the cutscenes in the last game were first person to emphasize the fact that you are the Doomslayer, and showing third person cutscenes takes away from that. I can see where this argument is coming from, especially if we refer to games like Half-Life with their storytelling, but the Slayer is still a silent protagonist, and all of his actions within these cutscenes still align with our actions. His motives stay consistent with the players, and so does his personality. The Slayer's backstory is explored more within the game, as it is revealed that the Slayer is the original Doom guy, which is an awesome cutscene by the way, and we get to hear Doom guy talk for the first time.
Guts. Huge guts. Kill them. Must kill them all.
Which I also know some people may complain about because we've never heard him talk in a game before, but I don't see the issue. He talked in the comics, and he only talks in the flashback. He doesn't talk during the course of the game's events, so he's still the same old silent protagonist. Not to mention that him not talking in the original games made sense because there was no one to talk to. I'm happy that they decided to center the story around the Slayer this time, and that despite him being a silent character, it works quite well because of all the subtle characterization and his interesting backstory. Basically, I don't see an issue with exploring more of the Slayer, especially when it's done really well. Seeing the old Doom Guy helmet literally made me jump out of my chair because of how awesome it was. Plus, it explains plot holes that existed within 2016, like how the Slayer was able to understand English and use firearms, despite being locked away for thousands of years. It's because he was the original Doom Guy who stayed in Hell to defeat the demons until the Night Sentinels picked him up while he was showing signs of psychosis. Which makes sense, battling demons for an eternity will make you crazy. The Sentinels then trained him as he raised through the ranks and became the Doomslayer, which then ties into Doom 2016 where the demons captured the Slayer and encased him in the sarcophagus. I thought I would be annoyed that a lot of the mysteries from the 2016 game were being revealed because the mystery is one of the coolest parts of that game, but sometimes mysteries are worth revealing if the answers are awesome. I'm really happy id Software made the decision to make it canon that the Slayer is the original Doom Guy, because it not only helps build upon the universe that id set up, it helps tie the franchise together. Apart from Doom 3. Although that game is still referenced quite a bit. It makes sense they couldn't add Doom 3 into the timeline because Doom 3 is a reboot of the series and takes place 100 years after the events of the original games, and the original games end with Doom Guy staying in Hell. So there's really no way Doom 3 could be added into the timeline. Anyway, long tangent over, I'm really happy with how the Doomslayer is handled in this game. What is also cool is that his backstory sets up the conflict for the main villain of the game, the Khan Maker. The Khan Maker is an interesting villain. She rules Urdak, which is the Doom version of Heaven, and she is a sort of god, and she, as well as other characters, warn the Slayer to just let the human race die and stay out of this whole situation.
This game has gone far enough.
I will have her transmission removed in a moment.
Despite the loss of the priests, Earth will fall, and my people will survive. I will answer the humans' prayers Reward those that believe.
This hub was of Maker design. She knows the systems well.
The final priest will be moved to a more discreet location, so our work can continue without further disruption.
She's a villain with fully established motivations. If Earth is consumed, then her people live, so she obviously would hate the Slayer for trying to stop that.
I pity the humans. I do. Theirs is a hard role to play. But I too have a world to save. Without their souls, there can be no hell energy, and the Argent will cease to flow. I cannot allow this to happen. You will not stand in the way of Erdak's progress. This is how it has always been done. It is not for you to deny us our chance at prosperity.
I think it's interesting because she clearly hates the Slayer's actions of killing demons and trying to stop the invasion, but she can't do anything about it because of the Slayer's status and his sovereignty. I think it's an interesting dynamic because the Slayer has earned a reputation so big that even the powers above him respect him. It's also shown that she has some history with the Slayer and that she is aware of his motivations of why he hates demons so much, and she even tries to bargain with him.
I know of what you have left behind. Go back to it then. Leave this crusade. You cannot save them. They have asked me for this, and so I give it to them. If you let the priest live, then I will return to you what the demons took from you so long ago. You need only turn back, and it will be yours again. All the pain you carry will be gone.
It's explained by King Novik that despite the actions of the priests, they are of Sentinel blood, and so they are very unhappy with the fact that the Slayer plans to kill them. Of course, the Slayer kills all the priests and turns his back on the Sentinels, which gives the Khan Maker the power to go against him by awakening the Icon of Sin. The Slayer does beat her, but she warns him that his actions will doom all of life. It does a great job setting up a sequel while closing off her character.
You have destroyed all that I was meant to rule, and all just to protect them, mere servants to our beliefs. You have broken the holy seal of Erdak. Your transgressions here will jeopardize all of creation.
She overall works as a villain, her motivations are understandable, she poses a great threat to the Slayer, and she has some interesting conflict and backstory with him. The boss fight with her is also pretty cool. It's also an interesting conflict because while she is letting the humans be killed in order to rescue her world, we are kind of doing the same thing. We're killing the demons so that our world can live. Obviously we side with the Slayer because Erdak uses a power that comes from human suffering, but the fact that both of them are trying to accomplish the same goal just for opposite sides makes it a more unique relationship than just a good versus evil. She's a solid villain overall. Old friends Vega and Samuel Hayden are back. Vega mainly works as an exposition machine, but that was his same role he served in the previous game, and all the exposition he gives is interesting. Samuel Hayden is back, and this gets into an issue I have with the game pacing-wise. The first act of the game is strong, the characters are all well established, we have a clear goal to work towards, and there is a lot of interesting lore to read upon. The third act is also really well handled as the stakes keep building up until they hit max with the final boss, and the ending is an overall satisfying if not abrupt one. My issue is this game's second act. The main goal for the Slayer is to kill all 3 Hell Priests, and he kills the first one in the opening level and then kills the second one at the end of the first act. But then we would have a short game if the Slayer just kills the third one right afterwards. So the second act of the game has Vega lose the signal for the third Hell Priest, as the Slayer then has to do some busy work like clearing a gore nest or finding Samuel Hayden so that Vega can relocate the priest. This kills the pace of the game because we just got done killing the second Hell Priest and there is currently a lot of momentum in the story, and then the story puts the brakes on and just comes to a stop for a couple levels. Not to mention that it is never explained why Samuel knows the location of the third priest. He just sort of does. The gameplay in these levels is fun, but there is basically zero plot development or character development. It just feels like the game was jumping through the plot a bit too quickly and needed to stretch itself out a bit. It's what makes Act 2 so annoying, because it just kills the pace of the plot, and it's mostly just clearing barriers so that the Slayer can progress through the story. It's boring story-wise. Luckily, once the second act is over, the third act slams into 5th gear right away, but it just makes some of the levels feel pointless. You could remove some of them and nothing would change in the story. I think they should have spread out the deaths of the Hell Priests more so that this issue wouldn't happen. Anyway, Samuel Hayden is back, and I know some people were disappointed with his inclusion in the game. While he isn't as prominent, I like the way his character is handled and how he is developed. If you remember from the previous game, Samuel was dedicated to helping the Slayer close the portal to Hell, but wanted to keep Argent Energy because of the potential as an energy source that it had. In this game, however, we come to learn how Argent Energy is made, with the souls of humans. After realizing this, Samuel comes to the realization that Argent is too evil of a resource to use and needs to be destroyed.
The demons only utilize a portion of the resources that come from the human soul. It was the Makers and the Sentinel Priests who discovered and unlocked the true power of the essence. They combined Sentinel and Hell energies together, refined and created Argent. With it they did wondrous things. Saved worlds from extinction, healed the sick, and gave infinite power to those worthy of it. This machinery was not made without Hell's knowledge. A deal was struck with the Dark Lord. In return for access to more worlds for Hell to devour, the Makers siphoned energy from the damned. It is an unholy union. It cannot stand any longer.
It is really cool seeing the villain from the previous game see the error in his ways and learning how much of a mistake he made. It's great character development. So overall, the characters in this game are very well handled. There is also plenty of backstory explored in audio logs and text logs, which provide great insight into the universe. The cool thing is that all of this is optional, and if you're not interested in the story, then you can skip the cutscenes. The issue is the storytelling of the narrative. Doom Eternal has a pretty simple story, but it overall works because of the characters. The issue is that the game itself only covers the bare bones of the universe. Like the Betrayer or King Novak, for example, they only appear for a cutscene and then just dip out. These characters have some interesting backstory if you read the codex. I mean, the storytelling in these cutscenes is good. The Slayer kneels before Novik, letting the player know that this individual is worthy of the Slayer's respect. He is the leader of the Night Sentinels and has immeasurable power. He may actually be even more powerful than the Slayer. We'll probably see more of him in the next century. The Betrayer is actually the father of the Icon of Sin, who was exiled to Hell after betraying the Night Sentinels to rescue his son. You wouldn't know this from playing the game, however. I think the issue is that people still have the mentality of Doom shouldn't have a story, and id Software really want to build a really awesome Doom universe with interesting characters and stories, but this restriction holds them back. So they have to only have a couple cutscenes, or just one cutscene with a certain character, and then make them mysterious and interesting enough that you'll want to read their codex. But Doom Eternal already has skippable cutscenes if you're not interested in the story, and thus you don't have to pay attention to the story if you don't want to. I think with the next Doom game, it should just go full on with the universe if they want to. If their idea was to create a simple story that has a lot of interesting backstory beneath the surface, that's what they achieved. However, if they want to create a full-on Doom universe, I would be totally cool with that too. Obviously the story should never take priority over the gameplay, but I would have no issue in exploring more of the universe the game is set in, but we'll have to wait and see. In conclusion, the story itself is super simplistic, but there is enough backstory within the game and within the collectibles to keep you entertained. The story has some pacing issues towards the middle, but the third act of the game really picks it up. I love all the backstory explored, I love all the characters, and despite the ending being abrupt, I think it was very satisfying to kick the Icon of Sin's ass again, even if John Romero wasn't piloting it. Doom 2016's multiplayer was fun, but was heavily criticised for not being like classic Doom or Quake, and instead resembling Halo and Call of Duty, which is why with Eternal they've decided to go in a different direction with the multiplayer. Now before I get into it, I must point out that Snap Map has been removed, which is a shame because so many creative game modes and maps came from it, and it would have been really cool to see what the community could have created with this game, so Battlemode has to make up for that. Does it? Not really. Battlemode is a lot of fun. One player plays as the Slayer, and then two players one of 5 demons, the Marauder, the Archvile, Mancubus, Revenant, and Pain Elemental. The Slayer plays the exact same as he does in the campaign, but playing as the demons is the most interesting part. All the demons have strengths and weaknesses in this mode, and all are meant to be played with different purposes in mind. The Pain Elemental works as a defensive assist unit, the Revenant works as an offensive assist unit, the Mancubus is the slow but hard-hitting enemy type, the Archvile works as a relatively stationary powerhouse, and the Marauder works as a match for the Slayer. It works best when you have a friend and use a combination of demons that complement each other, rather than just go for the same demon. The maps are fun to play in with lots of ways to traverse, and the mode itself is overall very fun, but the issue is I don't see it having lasting appeal. I would have preferred the traditional Doom or Quake deathmatch. I think id Software would be really great at doing that. There are funny skins you can unlock for the demons, and I wish these skins worked in the campaign. I would love to fight Pimp Mancubuses and Archviles. That would be hilarious. There is also plenty of lag in these matches, even if the internet connection for everyone is good, and there are a couple matches where I only lost or won the match due to lag, and that's unfair. Yeah. I'm basically trying to oh, did he just fell for the map?
Did he?
Yeah, he just did.
Huh.
At least on my feed he did.
Interesting. I did not see that.
Well.
Huh. Well, I don't see him. I don't hear him.
He just went through the map.
I don't smell him.
But from my perspective, this looks hilarious.
I don't smell him. What? He left the match! He left the match! No way! And we got the XP for it! No! Oh my god! That is so... Oh my god. We were literally planning on killing ourselves out of respect for him so he could win. But he quit.
Everyone I played with though, whether it be friends or random players, were all good sports. So yeah, Battle Mode is fun, but I don't think it should be the only multiplayer offering for Doom Eternal. Unless some new modes or new features get added to Battle Mode, such as new maps or demons to play as, I don't see this mode lasting long. In terms of stuff I would like to see added to Doom Eternal, it would be cool if they added a co-op mode for the campaign. Ripping and tearing with a friend would be so much fun. It would take a lot of work to do, but it would be a lot of fun. I would like to see a traditional deathmatch for the game since that's what Doom multiplayer has always been, and I would love a horde mode added to the game where you have to try and survive against an infinite wave of demons. Or hell, maybe have something like Bloody Palace in Devil May Cry with hundreds or thousands of floors of increasing difficulty, and you get a really awesome weapon or Doomslayer skin beating it. Maybe add some customization modifiers to it too. I would also love a cheat code that turns all the enemies into their 1993 sprites, or just give the game a pixelated look. That would be very funny. The campaign has plenty of content as is, but for those who want content past that, there isn't much, and unless new stuff gets added to Battle Mode, I think it will die out, and the single player DLC will be what brings back players to the game. Mick Gordon is one of gaming's best composers, and Doom 2016 is his most iconic work, so of course he would return for the sequel. It should go without saying that Eternal's soundtrack is fucking beautiful. Mick decided to go even further in combining synths and metal to create a really unique soundtrack. The first thing I love about this soundtrack is how much it references the old soundtrack. For example, the main theme in the main menu is the Icon of Sin's main theme in Doom 2. There are a bunch of examples, so I'll throw them on screen now. Second thing I love is all the ambient tracks that play between combat sections that really set the tone for the game. The sections we are on Phobos have a lot of electronic sounds to fit the more technological atmosphere. The soundtracks on Earth have a more metal vibe with guitar solos and drums building up the fights you're about to take part in. When you get to Urdak later in the game, it has a more holy vibe, but still a low tone to give the impression that something is wrong with this place. Of course, though, the main music in this game is the battle music that plays during combat, and holy fuck, Mick Gordon has ascended to god levels. Like the previous game, Eternal has a dynamic soundtrack that responds to how you play the game. It kicks in at all the right moments to make you feel powerful. The tracks themselves speed up in pace the further you get into the game, and just make the action more intense. The chanting in some of them just kicks it up to 11. The Icon of Sin's theme is so badass that just from the music alone, you know that this is the most intense fight ever. At this point, I'm convinced that Mick Gordon is secretly the source of the Slayer's power and is what charges him up during gameplay. Mick also invited a bunch of heavy metal screamers to act as a choir for the game, and their voices just make the music that much more intense. I'm not a musician or a music critic, so I can't go into depth behind the mechanics of making music or making music for a video game. All I can say is that it fits the game very well and adds a lot of value to the gameplay. Doom Eternal's soundtrack is fucking killer. In conclusion, Doom Eternal is possibly one of the best first-person shooter games ever released. It's not a flawless game by any means. There are some mechanics and some design choices I think are redundant, such as certain enemy types, and I hate certain ideas like the purple goo, but on the whole, when everything comes together, you have the most deep and complex combat system in FPS history. A story that is somewhat underdeveloped but has enough mystery and intrigue to motivate you to read more of the backstory, and a kick-ass soundtrack to boot. However, Battlemode is going to need some changes to keep players coming back. In the end though, the main focus of a Doom game is the campaign, and Doom Eternal nails that. It more than succeeds. Every first-person shooter game that releases after Eternal is going to be compared to it in some way, because Eternal is the closest thing to a perfect FPS game that we have right now. This does make me concerned about the franchise going forward though. Doom Eternal does have some flaws, but none of them stop the game dead in its tracks. And since Eternal is both a commercial and critical success, we are definitely going to be seeing more from the series, but I wonder what they will do to improve upon what's already been done here. That's the trouble with making a masterpiece. It's hard to go up from there. It's not impossible, however, and even though id Software have made mistakes in the past, they still keep creating awesome games. Even if their next game isn't Doom, I'm still very excited to see what's next. I would love a reboot of Quake, or hell, even a new IP by id Software. Maybe they'll take a break from Doom for a bit, and then work on something else, and then come back afterwards. I don't know. I just don't want the Doom franchise to go downhill from here. I don't want this to be the peak of the series. I want it to be even better. Either way, Doom Eternal is a masterpiece and shows that after 25 years, Doom is still the king of the FPS genre. And I hope it stays that way because of the impact that this series has had on not just the FPS genre, but gaming as a whole, and should be, and hopefully will be, respected for all eternity.
And you will be their savior. Your strength will be their shield, and your will their sword. You remain unbroken, for your fight is